All right. Welcome everyone to the January 17th, 2023 Accounts Receivable Core Committee meeting. Hope you all are having a wonderful start to the new year. As I put in the email, I do expect today will be a rather short meeting, but just wanted to go over a couple things and see if anybody has any topics that they would like to bring up for general discussion. So with that, we'll go ahead and get going here. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Gerald Floyd. I'm the Statewide Accounts Receivable Management Coordinator here at DAS. And I will collect the attendees via the Teams listing that it provides. So to avoid the fun confusion of everybody talking over each other, we'll skip our normal introductions we do when we're in person. But first in our agenda today, wanted to go over a reminder that the Q2 ARPM reports are due at the end of the month.
Sorry.
So those of you that have already submitted those, I thank you very much for getting those in early. But just a reminder to get those submitted for those agencies that are subject to the Oregon Accounting Manual. If you're not sure, please feel free to reach out to me and I will let you know if I'm expecting a report from your agency or not. Any questions, concerns on the ARPM report? Hearing none. Legislative bills, wanted to share with folks. Obviously, we're very, very early in the session, today being the first official day. But last week when they did all their swearing in and so forth, there were quite a few bills that dropped. These are, for the most part, from what I can tell, the pre-session filings from the legislative members. So I expect there to be a considerable amount of additional bills to be released as the session goes on. But just my very early review of that first day's activity, kind of went through and highlighted different bills that could impact either accounts receivable or specific agencies. In some cases, it abolishes certain agencies or commissions, creates others that has an impact on various LFO reporting and ARPMs and things like that. So I keep track of those to know which agencies are still around and which ones are coming in to add to my list. So just going through these real quickly, if you, I will include these in the minutes. So, don't feel like you need to write everything down as quickly as I talk, but, these may or may not affect you. But first off, House Bill 2029 changes the requirements for items that are recorded at the county clerk for recording from 8-point font to a minimum 10-point font requirement. Again, don't know how much that affects you, but if you have certain letters that maybe have footers, things like that, that might be in a smaller font, you may have to make some adjustments for anything that gets recorded with the county clerk. House Bill 2411 dissolves the Oregon Alfalfa Seed Commission. House Bill 2444 establishes the Superintendent of Public Instruction as a nonpartisan statewide elected office. Again, I mostly follow this because elected offices have usually a little bit different requirements when it comes to some of the statutes and so forth that apply to them. So just keeping an eye on that. House Bill 2452 prohibits Department of Justice from charging officers or agencies of state government for assistance rendered. For those of you that have used DOJ services in the past, this would certainly apply to you and how you get billed for those services. This would change that, make them primarily essentially a general fund agency um, with their appropriations during the budget process and not from an assessment of their services or time for their services. House Bill 2471. Normally I wouldn't put a bill that talks about a study on my list of things to watch, but there's a couple this time that I thought were worth monitoring. In particular, this one, OHSU, OHSU, in consultation with DAS, is to study how best to revise their repayment method for individuals that receive scholarships from the Healthy Oregon Initiative, but do not fulfill their agreement. The interesting thing on that one is it specifically says they can't use DOR. So I'm interested to see how this bill moves forward, and then as a result of that, how that study moves forward and gets presented to the legislature to see kind of what that looks like for OHSU. Next, I've got two bills that I'm not sure if this was just an error on Ledge Council's part, but there are two bills, 2863 and 67, that are basically the exact same thing. It's establishes an Oregon Desalination Authority, so that would be a new agency essentially. So I'm not sure why there was two created. Again, I don't know if that was just an error in assigning the bill numbers or not, but we'll see kind of which one, if either, moves forward during the session. House Bill 2976 relates to the establishment of an Oregon Spirits Board as a semi-independent state agency. Be interesting to see how that moves forward in association with the existing OLCC component. But I don't know if that's more around marketing like a commodity commission is, or more the regulatory, but we'll see how that moves forward. Then moving into the Senate bills, Senate Bill 222 authorizes the state Department of Geology and Mineral Industries to accept credit cards and add the fee of the credit card to the transactions. It's interesting to me on this one if it's just primarily the ability to add the card fee that they're looking at, because I don't see where there's a prohibition on the ability to accept credit cards, but they may need the authorization to actually pass the fee along. Senate Bill 24 prohibits post-secondary institutions of education from refusing transcripts because the student owes a debt to the institution. This has kind of been a common practice that if you had outstanding amounts owed, they could withhold your transcript. This would make that requirement go away, not the debt, but the ability to withhold the transcript. So Senate Bill 309 modifies the number of weeks notice to interested persons in a decedent's estate that must be published. I didn't read specifically what it changes it to, but I think it increased it, if I recall. But obviously, for those that do collect from estates, that may be of importance to you. Senate Bill 314 permits the accrual of interest on child support payments that are in arrears only if the non-payment was willful. So I'm curious to see how this would be applied in a practical manner versus the way that interest may accrue today. What defines the willful? How does the agency prove that? It may be a very cumbersome task for DOJ to do, but we'll see how this one moves forward. And then Senate Bill 322 transfers the Public Defense Services Commission from judicial to the executive branch. Again, I monitor this primarily because of the applicability of various statutes and so forth to executive branch versus judicial. And so we'll see if this moves forward, how that will get transferred to the executive branch. And then we have Senate Bill 501, which establishes a Bank of the State of Oregon. So that certainly could make an interesting situation from an accounting perspective for many agencies. So we'll see what happens with this, but a creation of a Bank of Oregon, State of Oregon. Senate Bill 538. This is very similar to the Senate Bill 222 regarding Dogami, but this is a very broadly worded authority for any state agency to accept credit cards and to pass the card fees to the person making the payment. So again, I'm not sure if this is trying to make sure that there's the authority for passing the fee, but that's what it looks like. And then finally, Senate Bill 613 creates a commission for Indigenous communities. Again, I look at these for applicability for reporting LFO, ARPMs, etc. So again, this is just from the first day when approximately 2,000 bills were released in OLS. I'm sure there will be many more to come, but these are the ones that I saw that certainly are of interest from the DAS perspective, or have some impact on DAS monitoring, oversight, etc.
I'm on the Teams meeting, yeah.
Pardon, go ahead.
Oh, no problem.
So does anybody know of any other bills that their agency has seen that we should be adding to this list? I'm certainly open to adding any that impact an agency. So I will say there are a number of bills that talk about various studies. I did not add those to this list because, if it passes and an agency has to do a study, it's not actually changing the requirement until, some future bill. But there are a number that looked at things like studying courts and court fees and recidivism rates when there's restitution, things like that. So there are a number of topics that certainly may be of interest, but for this session, it's not actually changing a statute. It's just for an agency to conduct a study. I have not added those to this list unless somebody thinks that it really is something that we should be monitoring for future purposes. I'm certainly willing to add those. But anyways, if I've asked before, but if I know that most of the agency LCs that became bills have not yet been read, so they're not part of the OLS. If your agency is expecting a bill to be to go through this session, then and it has an impact on accounts receivable, debt collections, etc., please forward those to me or send me an email I would be glad to monitor those to see, kind of what's the temperament, if you will, with the new session and the new elected leadership, to see which things are going to move forward and which ones aren't. So this will be a very interesting session to, kind of look at those things and just kind of see where the session leads us, and what we can expect in the future. A couple of things that I didn't add on the agenda, but just very quick announcements. The DAS Accounts Receivable Management Report that is published to the legislature is currently in for review with the Chief Financial Officer, George Naughton. We expect that we will get his comments back, and that will be published by the end of the month. And when it is, I will send an announcement out with a link that goes on our website, in case anybody is interested in reading that. I'll let you know when that gets posted, but that is coming very soon. And then similarly, there are a couple of OEMs that were out for comment late last year, that the CFO is currently reviewing those. Once the budget process slows down a little bit, they're expecting to be able to get to reviewing those changes to the OEMs. There were two that they're part of Chapter 35. And so when you look at the OEM page, these OEMs where the comment period is closed, these are the ones that the CFO is currently reviewing. One just kind of made some language changes to definition of liquidated and delinquent. You can see what the final version is, as well as the track changes. And then some changes to OEM 353090 regarding coordination of vendor payments. Primarily, this has to do with adding a component for agencies that use spots cards, or as it's called, an alternative method of payment than using SFMA. And it basically is kind of creating a threshold for spots purchases over that threshold that the agency would look in SFMA for the vendor. And if the vendor has the deactivated status with contact DOR, that the agency would make the payment through SFMA so that the vendor coordination intercept would take place. And so it kind of closes a bit of the loophole for all of the transactions that go through the spots card versus payments out of SFMA. So with that, those are the announcements that I had. And so does anybody have any topics, questions, things that they would like to ask the group? This would be a good time. We can kind of have our roundtable discussion. Michelle, go ahead.
I just want to make sure I understood that last part about the intercept, the offset payments. With the spots card, are you talking about, so like ODOT, we process everything through Teams and that interfaces to SFMA, which in essence means that a lot of our stuff, if it goes through spots, it gets bypassed through that vendor offset program because of how that works. So is that addressing this?
So you would still continue the process that you do for vendor coordination for the payments to go through your system. What this would change is if the agency is using a spots card to make a purchase, the recommendation for the threshold, each agency sets their own threshold, but the OEM recommended is a purchase of 10,000 or more. So a single transaction of a spots card of 10,000 or more, that before you make that purchase using the spots card, you would verify whether or not there was a match through the current vendor coordination process. Exactly what that would look like for your agency, I know you guys kind of have your own process for that. You know, may need to kind of look at that, but basically within an SFMA agency, they would go into SFMA, pull up or look for that vendor. If the vendor exists in SFMA, are they currently active or deactive for DOR purposes? If they are deactivated, contact DOR. Don't use the spots card. Make your entry in SFMA so that the vendor coordination process would work. This is not replacing what you currently do for vendor coordination. It would add just those purchases of 10,000 or more on the spots card.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Anybody have any roundtable questions, items that they want to discuss? None? Okay, well, I guess if nobody has any roundtable items, then our next meeting date will be on March 21st at 2 p.m. So I hope that everybody is having a wonderful start to the new year and had a wonderful holiday season. And I thank you all for joining us today. And we will see everybody again in March. We are adjourned.